Hey everyone, welcome back to Fogman Stories. After a few opening episodes, I've decided it's time we dive deeper into some of the eeriest ghost stories from Saigon, or from somewhere across Vietnam. The place where I was born and raised. What you're seeing on screen right now is Google Earth. Today, I'm taking you to a place that has haunted generations. A real place, right here in Saigon, a place once whispered about in fear. That place is the 727 Tran Hung Dao apartment complex. Today, it's just an empty lot. The building was demolished years ago. But if we could turn back the clock, go back to before 1975, we'd see a towering structure that dominated the skyline. And in the heart of Cho Lan, Saigon's Chinatown, it became infamous for reasons that no one could quite explain. So, are you ready to find out what really happened there? Oh, and before we begin, don't forget to hit that subscribe button to support Fogman Stories. Now, dim the lights. Maybe grab a drink, and let's step into the shadows together. Chapter 1. A Whisper Beneath the Concrete. If you've ever lived in Saigon, especially around District 5, chances are you've heard of 727 Tran Hung Dao. Maybe from an elderly family member, maybe through cafe gossip on the sidewalk, or maybe from an online post with a catchy headline. The most haunted building in Saigon before 1975. But whether you've heard the name or not, forget what you think you know. Today, I'll tell you a story, or rather, a patchwork of memories, whispers, and fragments, gathered into a complete picture of a building once hailed as a symbol of modernization in the heart of Cho Lan. And also a place said to be sealed with the spirits of 4 young women beneath its foundation. This story doesn't begin with gore or terror. It begins with ambition, a dream to build a skyscraper, modern and daring, that would defy both feng shui and deeply rooted superstition in 1960s Saigon. But in that ambition, were the first cracks of something no one could explain. The building, known as the President Hotel, later called 727 Apartment by locals, stood 13 stories tall at 727 Tran Hung Dao Street. Ward 1, District 5. It was near the intersection of Nguyen Biu and Tran Bin Trong. Just a short walk from Ndong Market and the bustling heart of Cho Lan. At that time, in the early 1960s, any building over 10 floors was a rare feat in South Vietnam. But the number of floors, specifically, the number 13, would forever make it a subject of endless speculation. From the very first day of groundbreaking, things didn't go smoothly. Every time the crew prepared to lay the foundation, machines malfunctioned, cables snapped, concrete came out uneven. Workers, even experienced ones, suffered accidents. A construction manager named Mr. Liu once said, "I've never seen anything like it. The excavator broke down 3 times in a row. It's like something was resisting us." Some superstitious workers lit incense and prayed in secret. A few quit after just a few weeks, saying, "Every night, I hear footsteps on the roof of the sleeping quarters." When asked, they'd only say, "This place isn't clean." Locals began whispering that the land used to be an old cemetery, Bai De Ma, in Vietnamese. Some said they saw a Chinese Taoist priest visiting near sunset, walking the perimeter with incense and a small ritual bell. But those were just stories. No one had hard proof. Despite the rumors, construction pressed on. Behind it all was a powerful man, Nguyen Tan Doi, known then as the king of high-rises in Saigon. He wasn't just wealthy, he was bold. He didn't shy away from taboos that others feared. "No one dares to build 13 floors? Then I will," he once said. "Let Saigon know we're not afraid of any number." And so, the President Hotel rose higher and higher, like it was challenging heaven itself. But then, the strange stories began spreading. First, small accidents, someone slipping on the stairs, a chunk of concrete landing on someone's foot, mild electric shocks. Then, it escalated. One laborer, sleeping on site, said he heard 3 soft knocks on his dorm door at around 3 a.m. every night. Not rushed, not loud, just steady. When he opened the door, no one was there. He brushed it off as a prank. But it happened 3 nights in a row. On the 3rd night, he opened the door again and found a small sandal on the ground. A woman's size. He left the site the next morning without saying a word. Another incident happened to the staircase crew on the 5th floor. 2 workers fell in the exact same spot. 3 days apart. Both said they felt something tug their foot mid-step. One broke an arm. The other never came back. Veteran workers stopped talking. They simply told each other, "Work fast. Leave early. Don't stay past dark." And like that, the bad reputation spread beyond the worksite. Locals whispered, "That number 13 brings trouble." A drink vendor nearby said, "I saw it, a white figure moving through the hallway," even before they finished building it. Back then, I kept quiet. I was younger. Now that I'm old, I can say it out loud. Of course, some didn't believe. They had a point. Ghost stories often evolve from rumors and fear. But if it's all just imagination, why do so many different people tell the same story? With the same details? And if you're someone who likes to ask questions, stay with me for the next part, where we'll go back to 1960 to learn who really built this place. And how one decision, keeping that 13th floor, may have started a chain of events that still hasn't ended. Even 50 years later. Chapter 2. The King of High Rises and the Forbidden Number. In the 1960s, Saigon was like a symphony blending tradition and modernity. The city was alive, energetic, full of Western influence, yet still rooted in Eastern spirituality. You could sip French-style coffee in the morning, dance to American music at night, but come bedtime, you'd light incense and pray for peace. And even the most progressive citizens still feared the number 13. Cats meowing at midnight, or dreams about snakes. In that era of contrasts, one name rose like a legend, Nguyen Tan Doi, the King of High Rises in South Vietnam. Born into a poor family in the Mekong Delta, Mr. Doi started as a math teacher, but soon gave up that life to enter the world of business. With sharp instincts and bold determination, he quickly built a real estate empire. He was said to be the first man in South Vietnam to own so many high-rise buildings, spreading from downtown Saigon to the heart of Cho Long. Among the buildings he owned, several stood out. The Mai Lone Building, Trong Dinh Street, Tan Luc, 177-179 Le Ton Ton, Victoria, 937 Tran Hung Dao, Duc Tan, 491 Phan Ton Gion, and the Prince Building, 175-177 Pham Ngu Lao. But the most infamous one, the one people still talk about, was the President Hotel, later known as 727 Tran Hung Dao. Mr. Doi was fearless. When others hesitated at the number 13, he laughed, "If everyone's afraid, who will change Saigon?" But it was this boldness that would later lead him into the shadows of the unknown. According to those who worked on the project, the President Hotel was originally a joint venture between Mr. Doi and a French businessman. The French partner was deeply superstitious. When he saw the blueprint with 13 floors, he reacted with visible discomfort. To him, the number 13 was bad luck, just like Vendredi tries, Friday the 13th, in Western culture. Despite many discussions, Mr. Doi refused to change the plan. The Frenchman eventually withdrew and handed full control over to Doi. But before leaving, he made one final request: to bring in a Chinese geomancer, a feng shui master, from Cho Long to perform a spiritual protection ritual, just in case. At the time, people thought of it as a symbolic gesture, but no one could have guessed that this quiet ritual, done without fanfare, just incense smoke and solemn murmurs at each of the 4 foundation corners, would later become the center of so many rumors. One worker remembered, that day was blazing hot, but when the ritual started, the wind suddenly picked up. The feng shui master sprinkled black powder while chanting in Chinese. He did something at each of the 4 corners. We weren't allowed near, and from that day on, the sight felt different. One man fell from a high scaffold, even though he wore a safety harness. Another was hit by a falling object and hospitalized for a month. A crew working on the 3rd floor said that during a lunch break, they heard a woman's giggling from behind a metal sheet wall, an area with no one nearby. At first, they thought they were hearing things, but when it kept happening, more people began to feel an eerie chill near the western corner of the foundation. Some became sick with sudden fevers and had to return to their hometowns. Others simply left the project without explanation. Oddly, none of these strange incidents were officially reported. Everything was whispered, shared between workers, passed down to the locals. A tea vendor nearby said, "Usually a new building site is full of life. This one? Cold, quiet. I never heard people laughing. And every time the building grew another floor, the sky would cloud up, even on a sunny day." During the concrete pour for the 11th floor, a gust of wind toppled scaffolding and injured 2 men. That night, the night guard heard 3 soft knocks on the site office door. Just 3, no more, no less. The strange events multiplied, but due to financial pressure, the project continued. When the President Hotel officially opened in 1965, it was a marvel. Luxurious interiors, wide balconies, red-carpeted hallways, and one of the most advanced elevator systems in Saigon. But alongside the praise, the strange stories never stopped. Guests staying on the 12th and 13th floors often complained. Footsteps above the ceiling, knocking on their doors at midnight, voices from the adjacent rooms, despite being alone on their floor. One American guest claimed someone pulled the blanket from his bed. When he turned on the light, no one was there, but the edge of the bed looked as though someone had just sat down. Soon, hotel staff began quitting, some after just weeks. The hotel earned a new nickname, the Cold Hotel. People stopped wanting to stay there alone at night, and from that moment on, 727 became known not as a landmark of modern Saigon, but as a place best avoided after dark. Chapter 3. The Four Girls Beneath the Foundation. Throughout the time 727 Tran Hung Dao was still active, countless strange stories were passed down from generation to generation. But the most famous, most disturbing, and most terrifying of all was the rumor about the four girls. No one knew their real names, hometowns, or backgrounds. There were no records, no photos, no official mention of them at all. But what made it truly eerie was that, on every floor, in every apartment, in every hallway, whether the person telling the story was young or old, a security guard or a longtime resident, they all shared one common thread. They had seen one of the four girls, even though no one ever saw their faces clearly. According to an elderly construction worker who had helped build the complex in the early 60s, a secret spiritual sealing ritual was performed to neutralize the bad luck of building 13 floors. The ritual was conducted quietly by a Chinese shaman, Fap Su Gok Hua, at the suggestion of the French investor before he withdrew from the project. There was no grand ceremony, just incense, bells, and a few strange objects buried deep into the four corners of the foundation. From that day on, locals began to whisper, "Each corner of the foundation holds a girl." They were kept there to guard the building, or maybe to keep them from ever leaving. The tale spread so widely that parents warned their children never to mention the four girls at night. It was said that calling their name could wake them up, disturb spirits that had never truly found peace. One elderly woman named Ms. Tu, who had lived on the second floor for nearly 30 years, once said, "I never look at mirrors at night. One time I woke up for a drink, passed the hallway mirror, and saw someone behind me. Long, soaking wet hair, like she just bathed. But when I turned around, no one was there." Then came the story of Tin, a college student from Ben Tre. Because of financial hardship, he rented a small room on the 13th floor. The price was surprisingly low. The landlord only said, "As long as you can handle it, it's yours." Tin shared that from the very first night, he always woke at exactly 2:33 a.m. No loud sounds, just 3 soft knocks on the door. Slow, rhythmic, as if someone didn't want to disturb him, but also didn't want to be forgotten. One night, he turned on all the lights and sat waiting. When the knocking came, he rushed to open the door. No one, but on the floor, just beyond the doormat, was a single jasmine flower. Pure white, still wet with dew. His room had no balcony, no flower pots. He began asking around, the parking lot attendant, the street drink vendor, even a fortune teller near the local temple, all gave him the same advice: stop looking. Son, the more you know, the heavier it'll get on your mind. One night, while studying, he dozed off at his desk. In the dream, he stood in a large, dimly lit room surrounded by flickering candles. 4 candles, 4 corners. In the center stood a girl in a white traditional dress, ao dai. With long, unkempt hair, her back turned to him. She whispered, "Stay with us, we're so lonely." Tin woke in a cold sweat. His desk lamp flickered like it was about to burn out. The next day, he moved out, leaving all his belongings behind. The next tenant was a young couple. They only lasted 2 weeks. The wife started sleepwalking, wandering up to the rooftop in the middle of the night and staring down in complete silence. 4 corners, 4 shadows, 4 stories, each one echoing from a different spot in the building. Repeating over the years, no one could prove anything, but no one dared to deny it either. They say that if you ever stay in the building alone during a full moon, and take the elevator floor by floor from the bottom to the top, stopping at each level, you might catch a glimpse of a girl in the mirror. Each floor, 1 blink, 1 shadow. But whatever you do, don't turn around. Because if you do, Chapter 4. Whispers that walk the halls. If the tale of the 4 girls was the mysterious legend surrounding 727, then the actual strange occurrences inside the building were the real reason people couldn't forget it. The longer you lived at 727, the more you realized what was happening wasn't random. The incidents repeated themselves. They were eerily similar, and not everyone dared to speak about them. Story 1. Ms. Twee on the 9th floor. Ms. Twee was a retired accountant who lived alone in apartment 904 for nearly 10 years before the building was torn down. She wasn't superstitious and never cared for ghost stories. But after all her neighbors moved away and the floor became nearly empty, with only her left, things began to change. She said, every night, around 2 a.m., I'd hear footsteps right outside my door. The soft sound of slippers. Step by step. Some nights they passed by. Other nights, they stopped. Right in front of my door. I opened it once. No one. But the air, it was ice cold. At first, she thought she was imagining it. But things got clearer. One night, she forgot to lock her door. As she was reading, it slowly creaked open, like someone gently pushed it. No wind, no one. The lights blinked 3 times, then went out. Since that night, she always kept a bowl of salt under her table. Story 2. Mr. Sao the Night Guard. Mr. Sao worked night shifts for many years. A quiet, kind man, always reliable. He'd seen many things in the building, but one night stood out. Around 3 a.m., while patrolling the 8th floor, he noticed the lights in room 802 flickering non-stop. Strange. This room had no electricity and hadn't been rented in ages. He radioed the control room. Is anyone still in 802? The reply, no, that room's locked. He walked closer. The curtain inside gently swayed, like someone had just peeked out. He reached for the doorknob. Suddenly, His whole body tensed, goosebumps, heart racing. Then the power cut out. The hallway plunged into darkness. He requested a transfer to the ground floor the next morning. Story 3: Mai and the Elevator. Mai was a freshman living with her cousin on the 12th floor. One night, after a late study session, she took the elevator home. It was empty, dimly lit. When it reached the 10th floor, the elevator stopped. No one had pressed the button. No one was waiting. The doors opened slowly, into total blackness. She stepped forward to close the door, then heard a soft sigh behind her. She turned. Nothing. The elevator stood still for several minutes. Then, without a sound, the doors closed and it resumed moving. When she got home, she collapsed in tears, unable to speak. The lights in her room flickered 3 times before finally turning on. Story 4: The Child on the 5th Floor. Ms. Nock and her 5-year-old son were returning from school. As they passed through the 5th floor to drop something off with a neighbor, her son suddenly stopped. He pointed toward the end of the hall. "Why isn't that lady wearing shoes?" "Mommy?" Startled, she looked. The hallway was completely empty. When she asked him again, he looked away and said nothing. That night, he came down with a high fever. While sleeping, he mumbled, "She asked me to play, but it's too cold. Mommy." He didn't recover for 3 days. Story 5: The Midnight Vloggers. By the time most of the building had been vacated, a group of curious young vloggers decided to explore and film at night. They brought flashlights, cameras, even electromagnetic sensors. At first, everything seemed normal, but by the time they reached the 3rd floor, the air felt heavy. Nam, one of the group, zoomed in on a dusty window. Suddenly, his camera glitched and shut off. When they reviewed the footage later, in the corner of the frame, they caught a glimpse of a dark figure gliding quickly past the hallway window. They left the building immediately. The video was posted online under the title, 727 Apartment, Where Shadows Still Linger. Chapter 5: The Final Years Before the Silence. By the late 1990s, 727 Tran Hung Dao was no longer a place people wanted to live. The building had deteriorated badly, cracks in the walls, water leaks, rusty staircases that creaked with every step. The elevator worked sporadically, and many residents were too afraid to use it, choosing instead to walk up to the 10th or even 11th floor. Still, for those who couldn't afford to move, 727 remained home. Over time, unease became routine. People grew used to the strange sounds at night. Families would hear chairs dragging across the ceiling while having dinner, even though the apartment above had been vacant for months. Residents hung mirrors shaped like bagur, traditional feng shui talismans, outside their doors, sprinkled salt on balconies, or taped protective charms in corners. No one spoke openly about it, but everyone believed it's real. Ms. Diem, a retired teacher, lived alone on the 11th floor. She was one of the last remaining tenants in the building's left wing. She recalled that the strange sounds became more distinct with time. Some nights I'd hear soft tapping on the wall, 3 knocks. Always the same, always at exactly 2:33 a.m. She said, "At first, I would get up and turn on the light. But later, I just lay there and whispered prayers. She continued, there was a night I heard the sound of someone dragging a chair next door. But that apartment had been locked for a year. The keys were with management. She lived like that for nearly 2 years before moving in with her niece. Before leaving, she left behind a bowl of rice and a single stick of incense placed in a salt bowl, her way of saying goodbye. Mr. Tong, the last night guard of the building, still remembers his final shift. Around 3 a.m. I was doing my rounds on the ground floor when I heard laughter, soft, girlish giggles. At that time, only a few apartments still had tenants. I pointed my flashlight toward the stairwell. Nothing. But right then, the elevator opened by itself. No one had pressed the button. Mr. Tong quit a few days later. Not because he was afraid, but because he felt no longer welcome. In 2016, the city government officially ordered the evacuation of all residents and began the process of demolition, citing the building's poor condition and safety concerns. The plan was announced nearly a year in advance so families could prepare. Some were relieved to be moving to better homes. Others felt heartbroken, having spent half a lifetime there. And then, something strange happened during demolition. Several workers operating excavators said certain parts of the ground wouldn't budge. The earth seemed hard, resisting the machines. One operator said, "We've worked on many sites before, but nothing like this, especially the 4 corners of the foundation. It's like something was holding it down." There was even a rumor, never confirmed, that while digging in the northwest corner, a worker uncovered a brown cloth bundle. Inside, a lock of human hair and a slip of paper with Chinese characters. That man went back to his hometown within the week. No explanation. After the building was demolished, the lot remained empty for years. And despite being in one of the busiest, most expensive areas of District 5, nothing lasted long there. A construction project would start, then stop. A coffee shop would open, then shut down months later. People whispered again. Maybe no one ever asked the 4 girls for permission. Today, the building exists only in memory. But for those who once lived there, walked past its shadow, or saw the faint glow of a 13th floor light through the rain, those memories still linger. Like eyes watching silently from above, and maybe they never truly left. And that is the fate of a building that once meant something to someone. A place that once sheltered lives, witnessed joy and sorrow, endured war and the slow erosion of time. Today, whenever I pass by the old address, 727 Tran Hung Dao, I still stop and glance over. What used to be a towering structure is now just an empty lot. Overgrown grass, silent earth, but somehow, the memories are still there. I remember how, during Lunar New Year, people used to sell flowers there, brightening the space with color and life. But this year, there was none of that. Maybe it's the struggling economy. Or maybe, it's something else no one wants to say out loud. Whatever the reason, that's the whole story I wanted to share with you tonight. I hope it left you not only with chills, but also with a quiet sadness for the things that once were, for those who once lived, and for the shadows that still linger in the heart of Saigon. Before we end, I just want to say, if you enjoyed this story, please hit the subscribe button to support Fogman Stories. And if you have a true ghost story of your own, feel free to send it to the email address in the video description. Thank you so much for listening. Once again, this is Fogman Stories. See you in the next video.